Yo, what's up? I gave every League champ a Pokemon type. I just thought it'd be fun. I'm a fan of League, I'm a fan of TFT, I'm an even bigger fan of Pokemon. Played a bit of competitive, and this was actually harder than I thought. This is the second time I'm recording this, and the first time it took 45 minutes, and I don't want it to be that long, so I gotta make this fast. To start, I'm gonna go over some ambiguous types to show what kinds of thoughts I had while giving them to champs. So the first one is the pure normal types. Giving out normal types in this game was difficult because there are some human characters, but they fight alongside deities, gods, and sometimes animals. So trying to decipher who exactly was normal type was a bit difficult. First, I'll talk about Akshan. For Akshan, I considered making him normal flying, but he doesn't really fly, he's just a guy with a grappling hook and some tools, so just normal felt more right. Caitlyn. Also just made her normal. Also just a person with some steel weapons, there was no real reason to give her another ability, so she's just normal. Darius and Draven, they're both kind of mean and rampant in the lore, but I didn't want to just make everyone like that a dark type. For Darius specifically, his bleed passive reminds me of all Pokemon dark moves having secondary effects, but both him and Draven are still just guys, so they're just normal type. Gangplank also has a passive with a type, which is fire, as it ignites people, and his barrels do explode, but at the end of the day, he is still just a guy doing things that pirates can do, so just a normal type. Gragas, just a big drunk guy. I considered making him water type since he likes drinking, but he's definitely not drinking water. Graves and Misfortune, both just people with guns, nothing too special about them, just normal type. Same thing with Sivir, except she has boomerangs instead of guns. Seraphine and Sona like to play music, a very normal thing, just this music has superpowers to it. Just a normal type. Tryndamere, this one was interesting. I had a hard debate between normal or fighting or both for him, but when I looked at the Pokemon move Endure, I saw it was normal type, and seeing how Tryndamere's R is very reliant on him not dying and living on 1 HP, similar to Endure, I figured normal type fit Tryndamere just fine. Twisted Fate joins his buddy Graves as just a normal type. Twisted Fate likes to throw cards and there's nothing special about that. Vayne is a bit interesting because she can go invisible, but she doesn't exactly fit a dark type or a ghost type, she just shoots arrows from her bow, so she's normal type. Now onto the last three normal types. These three are special because they are what I call transformative normal types, something that's seen in Pokemon like Ditto and Kecleon. They both start normal type, but they both have the ability to change type at any time throughout the battle. This relates to Kiana, as her W lets her empower her Q with different elements. This includes rock, grass, and ice. Udyr has a somewhat similar mechanic, except instead of empowering one ability with another, he changes stances. He has a Phoenix stance, which would be fire type, a tiger stance, which could be ground type, a turtle stance, which could be grass type, and a bear stance, which could be rock type. Nidalee is a bit different because while she transforms between a cat form and a human form, she doesn't actually change typing. Both forms are actually very normal, so Nidalee as a whole is just a normal type that can transform. And that's all the pure normals. My main philosophy was that if another typing for sure fit the champion, I didn't want to make them normal type. This will become more apparent later on, but for now, let's move on to the next typing. Fighting type. Fighting type in a game like this is a bit ambiguous because everyone is always fighting. I didn't want to make every melee champ a fighting type, so I tried to restrict fighting types to champions with very specialized or distinct fighting styles. In Pokemon, fighting can also symbolize a strong sense of justice or strong will and spirit. With these two ideas in mind, these are all of the pure fighting types. Fiora is for sure a fighting type. Some of her moves, like lunge and riposte, are actual fighting techniques. In game, she's an aggressive playstyle. Fighting works perfectly for her. Jax. I wasn't sure to make him normal or fighting because I didn't really know much about him, but after looking into his lore, he's apparently known as a weapons master, so it seems right that he be a fighting type. Lee Sin, very clearly a martial artist, very easy fighting type. Master Yi is a master trained swordsman, so fighting seems to work perfectly fine with him. Olaf, I considered making him normal fighting because he is just a Viking, but he's a Viking with superpowers in a way, so I figured fighting works for him since he also likes fighting in-game. Riven was actually made with the concept of a fighting game character in mind, with a lot of animation cancels and combos, so definitely a fighting type. Set. I also thought Set could have been normal, but he is entirely a fighter and he does wrestling moves, and that's a distinct fighting style to me, and there are wrestler Pokemon, so Set is fighting type. Vi is a skilled fist fighter, similar to Hariyama or Hitmonchan, for sure a fighting type. Jin Xiao is a champ that fits both concepts of the fighting type. He is trained with his spear and he's a warrior of justice. Fighting type through and through. That's all the pure fighting types. Going in the opposite direction, all of the pure psychic types. The problem I found with psychic types when giving every champ a typing is that there's a bunch of different kinds of mages in League of Legends. So I figured if I could give a mage a different typing other than a general psychic type, I did. And so these are just the pure psychic types. Quick note, in Pokemon, celestial beings like the sun and the moon in particular are represented through the psychic type, and you will see that here. Karma, LeBlanc, and Rise are all just champs with some general magic power. Celine gets bonus points for being able to surf through time and manipulate time, so he definitely fits the psychic type. Now Shen's a bit of a weird one. He's a ninja, but Dark doesn't exactly fit him. He can teleport to allies, and much of his power seems to be connected through the spirit. All in all, his kit seems to fit the psychic type the best. Now for Aphelios. Aphelios is a moon man, he gets his power from the moon. It's a bit of a weird one, but like I said before, celestial beings in Pokemon like Lunatone are usually represented with the psychic type. So that's where Aphelios gets his from. Bard is just a body of celestial energy, easily psychic, going by Pokemon's usage of this typing. Diana, same thing as Aphelios, she gets power from the moon, so she's psychic type. Easy. And that is all of the pure psychic types. Now for probably the most versatile and ambiguous typing, the dark type. Dark can mean a lot of things. Even in Pokemon, there's two different interpretations of it. In English, it's dark type. In Japanese, it's the evil type. So naturally, when I try to apply it to a different game, it gets a bit tricky. But I did my best, and I broke the dark type down into several different categories, which will be applied throughout the video. Here are all the pure dark types, starting with the assassins. Akali, Katarina, and Talon are all assassins that have high mobility or stealth, and are really good at killing people very fast. Now, the evil, sly, or demented dark types. Aatrox is a sort of demon god world ender type of champ, and similar to Yveltal, the signature of Aatrox's kit is his lifesteal, and this will be a reoccurring trait in many other dark types. In Jin's case, he apparently thinks that murder is art, and that's pretty dark, and there's nothing really normal about him. So there you go. Shaco is annoying, he's sly, he plays dirty tricks, he's the embodiment of dark type as evil. Swain has dark colors, he does dark things, he sucks the life out of things, and he has a crow motif, dark all around. For the users of dark magic, Silas was a turned evil user of magic, and he takes other people's ults for himself. Very sly, very tricky. Syndra is literally called the Dark Mage. I considered giving her Psychic, but she seems like a great embodiment of dark magic. Vhagar, an evil mage. Just look at him, he's evil. Now for the Void champs. For Belveth in particular, I had no idea what type to make her. In League, all of the Void champs are seemingly related, and I decided to make that apparent through the Dark type. And so, Belveth is just a pure Dark type. For Kassadin, his Dark type isn't so much about him using dark magic, it's more so his connection to the Void, and likely something related to Void magic, or some Void power or Void mutation. Now with all of the pure Dark types out of the way, it's time to talk about a type that does not actually exist in Pokemon, the Light type. This was very troubling because there are for sure at least a handful of champions that are absolutely light type. Here are all of the champs that I think would be light type if they could be. First on this list is Garen. I made Garen normal fighting. The fighting type comes from the part of fighting that symbolizes justice, and we know Garen loves justice. And actually in Pokemon, there are a group of Pokemon named the Swords of Justice. They are all fighting type with a secondary typing that matches them. For Garen, that typing would have been light. He should have been light fighting. But there is no light, so the best I could do was normal. Kale should have also been light. She is an angel with light magic, but the best I could really do was fairy. Fairy in some ways is kind of the opposite of dark. It's a bit of a tough one, but like I said, absolutely should be light type. Lucian, now this is a weird one, because going by the logic before that fairy is kind of the opposite of dark and Lucian's a demon killer, that would mean Lucian has to be part fairy. And if he was going to be fairy, he'd probably have to be normal fairy to differentiate him from the other fairies that are definitely fairy type. But there are other options like maybe fire or electric, since both fire and electricity make light. But honestly, just to match him with Senna, who it makes a little bit more sense for, I decided to make Lucian normal fairy. And on that note, Senna is Ghost Fairy. We've already discussed why fairy is being used here in place of light, but lots of Senna's abilities are very ghosty because she was once captured by Ghost Man Thresh. So, Senna gets Ghost Fairy, and by default Lucian gets normal fairy, since he has the same light powers, but none of the ghostiness. Lux, very clearly light type. Her name is literally a reference to light. All of her abilities are light based. I just made her fairy because it has pretty much become a replacement for light type at this point, and that's just the best I can do. Taric, also fairy type. He's a protector of beauty, he has some celestial power, he can keep people from dying. He'd probably be light type. He could also be normal fairy, but in the end it seemed like fairy just fit him better. Probably could have been light fairy, but no light type, so he's just fairy. Another option I had for some of these characters was fire or electric, since fire and electricity make light, but it didn't really seem to fit for any of them, especially since electricity is not really present anywhere here, so that's why I settled on fairy for most of them. And with that, that is all of the champs that belong to ambiguous types, or types that don't exist. And the rest from here on out will just be a speed run because I need to get through this as fast as possible. So let's go. Ari, Fairy Fire. She has a charm and little foxfires. Fairy Fire is a spell in D&D and World of Warcraft. It seems like it applies here. Also, she happens to be some sort of manifested spirit animal type thing, so fairy type. Alistar, ground type. Considered rock type because rock types are usually tanky, but he doesn't really manipulate rocks. But he likes to slam the ground with his pulverize, which is his signature ability, and he kicks up a lot of dirt. Amumu, ground ghost. It's a perfect typing for a mummy. He's similar to Cofagrigus and Renirigus, who would be holding mummies. Ground ghost. Anivia, ice flying. Articuno vibes. Easy. Annie, fire type. All her moves are fire related. She is called the Dark Child, so she could be dark, but going by the definitions I've set before with dark, she didn't seem to fit it. Ash, ice type. I was very hesitant to give her ice type because I didn't think she manipulated ice that much, going by the rule I set before, that if a champ could very easily and very clearly fit another typing, I gave them that typing instead of normal type. And Ash does have ice in her passive and her ult, so ice fits well for her. Aurelian Soul, dragon. He's a dragon. I considered a psychic dual type, but dragon is also used to represent D-power or arcana-esque elements in Pokemon, so dragon covers his celestial nature as well. Azir, ground type. Spawns his sand soldiers out of the ground. He's from Shurima, which is a desert. It's good enough for me. Blitzcrank, steel type. He's made of steel. He's a machine. Easy. Brand, fire type. Yep. Braum, ice type because of that normal type rule that we talked about before with Ash, who also happens to be ice type. Now this is an interesting one. Camille, steel fighting. Camille is a woman, but she's very augmented, so she's very machine-like. She has many melee abilities, like many other fighting types, and she's very prideful of her technique. Works very well steel fighting. Cassiopeia, poison. She's a snake, all her abilities are poison. She fits right in with Ekans and Arbok. Cho'Gath, he's from the Void, so he's a dark type, and he's a big colossal creature, so dragon works here for him. Big Guzzlord vibes, they both like to eat everything. At first I had Corki as Steel Fire. That is until I actually took into account that the steel machine he's in is a plane, so fire flying makes much more sense. A lot of his abilities are artillery based and only work because he's in a plane. All his explosions mostly fit fire type, so fire flying for Corki. Dr. Mundo, he isn't actually poisonous, but he has a bunch of chemicals running through his body, and he's experimented on, so he's chemically different, so poison seems to work for him. Echo, electric type. I really like this type because he kind of has some sort of light stick thing as a weapon, but more importantly, he makes his own devices. I thought about making him psychic type because he can travel through time, but his ability to time travel is more so an embodiment of his genius inventions. Because Echo is greatly defined by his amazing tools and his high mobility, electric type fits him the best. Elise, bug poison. She's a spider with poison. She'd be great friends with Ariados. Evelyn, dark fairy. She can turn invisible pretty much all the time. She's pretty evil, but she has a seductive nature to her like a siren. Put these two things together and I think she's dark fairy. Ezreal's a bit of a weird one. He shoots these projectiles, but until I looked into it, I never really realized what they were. Apparently, they are bolts of mystic energy, which means that he has some sort of magical abilities to him. However, he does not seem like the general mages that we mentioned before. To work within all parameters here, I made Ezreal normal psychic. Fiddlesticks, ghost type. Fiddlesticks is a nightmare. He's focused more on terror than it being evil or being sly and underhanded, which indicates that he's much more a ghost type than a dark type. He could still be dark, but similar to how Tryndamere is normal type because of Endure, Fiddlesticks is ghost because Nightmare is a ghost type move. Fizz is a fish yordle thing, so he's water type. Also, his ult is a fish. That's all there is to it. Galio is a stone giant. He has the celestial presence and stature of a dragon. Put those things together, he's rock dragon. Also, as a bonus, in TFT, they used one of Galio's skins as a dragon. In some way, Riot has acknowledged that Galio can be a part dragon. Gnar, one of my favorites, rock ground. Gnar likes to throw rocks. He's prehistoric, so is kind of based in the ground, and he even likes to slam the ground a lot. Gwen is a doll that was possessed by Viego's daughter. In Pokemon, when something gets possessed by a ghost, that thing, or that Pokemon, becomes ghost, and then a secondary type that matches whatever got possessed. In this case, I think the thing that fits best is Ghost Fairy. Hecarim is just a ghost horse. He could be ground because he runs fast, but that doesn't really warrant another typing, so Hecarim is just a fast ghost. Heimerdinger, electric type. Similar to Echo, he has his own contraptions, his own devices. For his own genius, he gets pure electric type. Alawi uses tentacles when she fights, has roots in the ocean, water type. Aurelia, psychic fighting. I really like this typing for her because she's known as the Blade Dancer. She kind of controls the blades with her inner spirit, her inner mind, which would mean psychic type, but she is also a fighter for justice and just a fighter in general, so fighting type is great. Get really big Gallade vibes from Aurelia, really like the champion, really like the Pokemon. Ivern, grass type, he's literally just a tree. You could say he's fairy because he's like the guardian of the forest, but honestly, he's just a tree. Just grass type is just fine for him. Janna, flying. I think pure flying is perfect for Janna. She throws tornadoes, she has other windy abilities. I get big Tornadus vibes from her. She could definitely be fairy too, but pure flying just feels so right for her. She's a great embodiment of wind. Jarvan, this one's interesting and probably disagreeable. Flying fighting. The way I see it, his signature flag drag and his ult represent a sort of pseudo flying, and he uses that flying to enhance his fighting abilities. Kinda like Hawlucha. The way he crashes down for kills reminds me of Hawlucha's signature move. So I like flying fighting for Jarvan. Jace, another pure electric type. Again, like Echo and Heimerdinger, Jace gets his electric type from his invention, the weapon he made in Arcane. I considered electric normal, but I think just electric for Jace works fine, seeing how important it is to his character. Now for another Arcane character, Jinx. I will say, this one is a bit weird. Jinx does have her own contraptions, and one of her weapons is electric, so I think electric should definitely be part of her typing, especially since she also moves very erratically, like lightning. However, I do think there is a sort of gap, a sort of difference between her and the pure electric types we've gone over before. Seeing as how she doesn't necessarily always use the electricity, and she's more so using her rocket launcher or her minigun, I think Jinx is normal electric. Again, this one is a bit weird, but I think it's the best way to go about this. Kai'Sa, dark normal. She has a void connection as Kassadin is her father, so she is dark type, but she is for sure the most human out of all the void champs, so normal type works for her. Kalista is just a ghost lady with ghostly abilities, not much else to say here. Karthus, I was going to say that he was part psychic because he is sort of a sorcerer, but his magic does seem to just be ghost magic, and he's a ghost that just loves death. So Karthus is just ghost. This one is really cool. Kayn is dark normal. However, for anyone that doesn't know, the lore behind Kayn is that there is a demon inside of him, which is where the dark type comes from, and his human self is the normal type. In game, this manifests in two special ways. One way is that the demon takes over and Kayn becomes a life-stealing bruiser. The other way it manifests is Kayn releases the demon and he becomes a shadowy assassin. To match this in typing, I made it so that when the demon takes over and Kayn becomes Rost, the red demon, he becomes dark fighting. He loses his humanity, his normal type, and as he becomes a life-stealing bruiser, he embraces the dark type and he can fight more, which is where the fighting type comes from. On the other hand, when Kayn becomes the shadow assassin, the demon leaves. In other words, the dark type leaves. However, as Blue Kayn becomes the shadow assassin, and shadow is very heavily associated with ghost in Pokemon, Kayn gains the ghost type. But because he's still human, he's normal type as well. He still has his ghostly abilities, but there's no longer a demon inside him. Very cool character concept, and I think the typings fit perfectly. Kennen, an electric Yordle. Definitely just pure electric type. He is a ninja, but dark type doesn't really fit him. Kha'Zix, he's a bug. He's from the void. Bug dark. Easy. Kindred represents both life and death, so to represent that, I think Ghost Fairy makes the most sense. Kindred could be grass for the connection to nature, but as a whole, grass doesn't really make sense. Kled, dragon fighting. Yes, I'm calling Skarl a dragon. That's just how it is. For Kled himself, I wasn't sure if his abilities warranted steel or fighting, but I definitely wanted to give him another type. Overall, I think fighting fits his tenacious personality the best, and it represents him well alongside the dragon of Skarl. Kog'Maw, poison bug. He spits poison, he's kind of a bug, he's from the void, but I feel like he's more so a bug than a void monster. It's really hard to say, to be honest. He's a weird one. I'm just gonna go with poison bug. Leona, psychic steel. The reason I went with psychic here is because of Leona's power to control the sun. I wasn't sure if maybe fire could work here too, but looking at the legendary Solgaleo. Solgaleo is known as a representative of the sun, and Leona's lore is somewhat similar, as she was chosen to have these celestial powers. Overall, Psychic Steel seems to fit Leona the best. Since her and Solgaleo have similar stories, it makes sense for them to share the same typing. Lilia, Fairy Grass. Lilia has very fairy and fantasy aesthetics and abilities, so fairy type works well, and a lot of her abilities are seedy and naturey, so grass is her secondary typing. Lysandra, Ice Dark. She uses ice, and she uses it in a dark magic type of way. Ice Dark. Lulu, Grass Fairy. This one's easy. She literally has her own fairy, and she has nature in a lot of her abilities, including tree stumps in her ult. Malphite's a big thing of rocks, he's rock type, that's all. Malzahar, I have him as Psychic Dark. He is a magic user who can induce bad thoughts and nightmares, but it seems more similar to like the way Drowsy can manipulate nightmares than the way that ghosts do. And he's from the Void, so dark type for the Void connection. Maokai, Grass Ghost. He's a possessed tree, like Trevenant, not much else to say here. Mordekaiser, Ghost Steel. Mordekaiser looks like a possessed suit of armor. That's not exactly what he is, but he looks like it. He is a sort of controller or leader of death, and he's a ghost, so Ghost Steel. Morgana, the opposite of Kale. Morgana is a sort of fallen angel, and if Kale's a fairy type, then Morgana would be dark fairy type. Nami is a sort of spirit, and all of her abilities are water based, so water fairy is an easy one. Nasus, he came from the Shurima ground, and he was actually a mastermind human before he got turned into a dog. Ground Psychic. Nautilus, Water Steel. He's a big diver man, guardian of the ocean, got an anchor and a steel suit, Water Steel. Nico, another fairy grass. She likes to play tricks and is mischievous like some fairies, and she has lots of flowery and naturey abilities. Fairy grass. Nila, as of the time of recording, Nila is not actually out, but it's very clear that she's a water type, and I'm gonna just get that out of the way now. Nocturne, Dark Ghost. Nocturne does like to turn the lights off with his ult, and he's a generally evil demon. He's known as a nightmare and shadowy, which implies ghost, so Nocturne is Dark Ghost. Nunu and Willump. They use a lot of snow, which is close enough to ice, so they are ice type. Oriana. The story behind Oriana is that they put a dying girl inside of a machine body, so to me that sounds like a steel ghost type. Ornn. Ornn likes to use steel when he's making his weapons. He can spawn rocks and hit them with his head, and steel and rock are tanky typings in Pokemon, so steel rock makes a lot of sense to me. Pantheon. Being based on a gladiator, his spear and shield are very important to his character, which says steel type to me, and he's a specialized fighter with this equipment, so fighting type. Steel fighting for Pantheon. Poppy's hammer and shield are a big part of her identity as a character, so pure steel type works for Poppy. Pike likes to swim around the map. In lore, he's known to assassinate from the water, and he can turn invisible like a ghost, since in lore, he actually did die once, or nearly died. Water Ghost. Quinn, normal flying. Quinn cannot fly. Valor can fly. Normal flying. Rakan, fairy flying. Rakan has a big charm ability. He himself is a charming spirit bird man thing, so fairy flying works. Rammus, ground type. He slams into the ground with his ult, and he rolls around like Donphan, who is a ground type. Rek'Sai, ground dark. Rek'Sai is kind of like a sandworm that lives in the ground, kind of looks like a bug, but is from the void, so ground dark hits all bases. Rel is a sort of metal bender on a metal horse, and is a tank, so steel covers all facets. Renata, poison type. Heavy use of chemicals in all her abilities, not much else to say here. Renekton, brother of Nasus, also came from the Shurima ground, was a great warrior before he got turned into a crocodile, so ground fighting. Rengar loves bushes, loves being a stealthy assassin. Dark grass. Get good shift tree vibes from Rengar here. Rumble, fire electric. Now I could definitely see fire steel, as his mech is a huge part of his character, but half of his abilities are fire, his Q and his ult, and the other half are electric, his W and his E. So personally, I think fire electric suits him just as good, if not better, than fire steel does. However, like I said, fire steel could absolutely 100% work, and I wouldn't argue. Samira, fighting steel. Samira has a daredevil personality, and you build a combo with her like you would in a fighting game. She has many specially made weapons, which means that her steel type has a very particular reasoning for it, so it's warranted. Fighting steel. Sejuani, ice type. Very cold, very icy abilities, yes, ice type. Shyvana, dragon fire. She's a dragon, she spits fire. Easy. Singed, poison. He leaves poison everywhere. Not much else to say there. Scion is interesting, because while he's not necessarily a ghost, he comes back to life like a zombie. But there's no zombie type obviously, and the closest thing there is to undead is ghost. So Scion's a ghost type. Skarner, bug type, he's a scorpion. He's like a scorpion from another world. He's just a scorpion though. Bug type. Soraka, fairy type. She's actually friends with Aurelion Sol, and she didn't have a physical form before the one she chose. So I thought she could have been a dragon because of her horn, but her celestial powers just seem fitting for fairy. Tom Kench, he's a catfish, water type. I wish they were all this easy. This one's pretty easy too though. Talia, rock type. She manipulates rocks in many ways. That's all there is to it. Teemo, grass poison. His poison shrooms are a perfect representative of the grass poison type, like Amoonguss, and he poisons his enemies with his passive. Very nice. Thresh, ghost steel. Thresh's lantern and hook are so important and symbolic of his character that steel type had to be added. He is the ghost man, ghost being that took Senna. Ghost steel. Tristana has lots of bombs, lots of explosions, fire type. Trundle, ice ground. Trundle's some sort of prehistoric troll. He manipulates ice, can freeze the ground, ice ground. Twitch, poison dark. Twitch likes invisibility, being sneaky, being tricky, and he throws and shoots poison. Poison dark type. Urgot, steel poison. At first I wasn't sure about the poison type, but his Q is chemically based, and it's clear that there's some sort of chemicals going on in his character. The steel obviously represents his crab legs, so he's steel poison. Varus, I was gonna have him ghost normal, but he is literally called a Darkin, that's like his race, so ghost dark, since he also has the soul of two men in him. Pride month. Vel'Koz, dark psychic. Dark type comes from the void connection, and he can absorb the information from others, which means he has some sort of psychic ability to him. Vex, ghost type. She has a ghost friend. She does have a dark and gloomy attitude, but I don't think she's actually dark type. There are Pokemon that are gloomy that are not dark type, so I don't think Vex needs it. Viego's a ghost with ghostly abilities. He can be ghost type Ditto with the way that he transforms. Victor, steel type. He's a man of pure metal. I could give him psychic since he has become a sort of sorcerer, but I will abide by his wishes to be a man made of steel and pure steel, so he is indeed a pure steel type. Vladimir is dark psychic. He can control and manipulate other people with his psychic typing, but he is evil and works with blood and life stealing, which is dark psychic. Volibear, now this is a weird one. He has no ice abilities, but he's a polar bear. So do I just not give him ice? But it doesn't feel right to make a polar bear without an ice type. Shout out to Beartic. But he's absolutely electric type. A lot of his abilities have to do with electricity and lightning and thunder. So I guess the way to rationalize making him ice type is that the thunder is a call to the mountainous thunder that he's from, where it snows a lot, and thus he can have the ice type. Warwick, poison dark. Warwick is the result of an experiment. his chemicals running all throughout his body, he hunts the weak, he's attracted to blood. Poison Dark seems to hit all aspects of his character. I'm waiting for Arcane Season 2. Wukong, Fairy Fighting. Wukong is a fighter that uses tricks to beat his enemies. He is also one of those manifested spirit animals, so Fairy Fighting definitely gets the job done here. Saya, Lover of Rakan, also Fairy Flying just like Rakan. She's also one of those bird women things. Fairy Flying for the lovebirds. Xerath, Ghost Psychic. Xerath is a possessed suit of armor with magic powers, and so I think that the magic powers are more important than the fact that he's a suit of armor. So he is Ghost Psychic instead of Ghost Steel. Also, we already have at least 2 or 3 other Ghost Steel types, and I didn't think Xerath belonged in the same category as them. And Xerath is good at manipulating people's minds in lore, so Psychic works just fine. Yasuo, Steel Flying. Yasuo has a wind wall, he has tornadoes, so flying makes perfect sense, and the steel comes from the importance of his sword, one of his abilities even being named Steel Tempest. His steel typing also makes more sense when you look at his brother Yone, who is ghost flying. Yone keeps his little wind dash, but now Yone's dead and he's a ghost, so now he has ghostly abilities and ghostly swords. Meanwhile, Yasuo still has a steel sword, so that difference is why Yasuo is steel type and Yone is ghost type. However, they are still brothers, so they both share the flying type together. Yorick is kind of just an undead leader. He spawns little demon babies and a ghostly spirit maiden, so he's just ghost type. Yuumi, another animal thing, fairy type, always friendly, has a fairy-like attitude. Yeah, fairy type. Zac, I thought could have been more, but I did just settle for poison type. All the Pokemon that look like him are poison. Zac is some sort of chemical experiment come to life, but he's not actually poisonous. Zed. At first I had Zed as pure dark. He's a sneaky ninja assassin. However, apparently he knows shadow magic, which is what his shadows are. And in Pokemon, shadow is very heavily related to the ghost type, so Zed is dark ghost, however, not an actual ghost. Zeri, electric type. She is lightning. And Filipino. We love representation. Ziggs loves explosives. Literally every ability is an explosive, so he is pure fire. Zoe, she's a mage with celestial guardian elements. She's very whimsical, like a fairy of folklore, so she gets psychic fairy. And finally, thankfully ending on an easy one, Zyra is a grass type. She uses plants, she throws plants, she grows plants, just like my sister. And that'll do it. I gave all 161 or something league champs a Pokemon typing for absolutely no reason at all. If you're here, thank you so much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe because I might do another kind of video like this in the future. Leave a comment, tell me what part you liked, tell me which ones I got right, tell me which ones I got wrong, tell me where my logic was flawed. I want to hear everything. Again, thank you so much, and have a great day, you beautiful freaks of nature.